Hey everybody, welcome back to Kayfabe Critique. I'm David.
I'm Jason. How y'all doing?
Jason, what's going on this week?
Well, I was distracted a little bit last week because the Cowboys were playing the Saints and they shocked the world. And I'm kind of worried about this week against Philadelphia, but I'm still kind of riveted by last week, and I'm just ready to go on this rock bottom show.
Yeah, absolutely. So we covered Survivor Series 98 a few episodes back. You can definitely check it out if you haven't already. And so we're going to start with basically pick up where we ended with that, starting with the Raw after Survivor Series 98 and running up to Rock Bottom, which was the In Your House December 1998.
Yeah, and just like when I went back and started watching these episodes, we were talking about this before we went on the air, just some of the, with them going like, showing what happened after the cameras went off, after the TV show went off, the extra attitude. I think that's so cool that they added that, and I just forgot. I still am just amazed by how much Austin cussed and drank.
What I love when I go back and I watch these old episodes of the Attitude Era is watching the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Just how entertained the crowd is and how enthusiastic the crowd is. They're on their feet, they're engaged, and it's not just one of those like now where a crowd will get up and they might change something here or there, or jump up for a high spot. These were, you can see true emotion from the crowd. They were so hooked to each character.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta know your damn role, shut your damn mouth, and that's the bottom line. You got you got like four people holding up one part of the sign, and it's just, I mean, there was just so much excitement in the air.
Yeah, or a sign that wraps around, oh, you didn't know?
Right. Yeah, the one that they had, and then on Survivor Series, they had the ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, D-Generation that proudly brings you. I mean, at first thought, I'm like, who has that kind of time on their hands to create that entire sign? But I'm like, that's dedication.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with Survivor Series 98, we had the tournament, the Deadly Games.
Right.
The title was vacant. Deadly Games tournament, it's looking like a lot of people are predicting Austin's going to win it.
Mm-hmm.
They try to make it look like Mankind is the corporate favorite and that he's going to win the tournament. Mm-hmm. The Rock is the hot baby face that's moving into the tournament. So you're thinking somehow, some way, one of these two guys is going to get the title and keep Vince McMahon from having it. Mm-hmm. But you're worried McMahon's going to screw him over somehow. But then we see the reverse happen. The tournament ends with The Rock versus Mankind. The Rock puts Mankind in the sharpshooter, gives the corporate eyebrow to Mr. McMahon, the bell rings. The Rock is now the corporate champion. Mankind's left in the ring confused.
Mm-hmm.
And he's trying to question, like saying, wait, I didn't quit. They turn on Mankind, they start beating Mankind down. Austin hits the ring to start fighting The Rock, tosses him out of the ring. That's how Survivor Series goes off the air.
Yeah, and just the way that they did that, you didn't think it was going to be The Rock, because a few weeks before that, I mean, Vince was saying he had a problem with the people, and he's taken, on one episode, he's taken the rock bottom and the people's elbow. He's trying to screw The Rock out of his spot in the tournament, and then Shane ends up helping The Rock counting the 3 against Mark Henry to get The Rock back into the tournament. So you're thinking that Vince is against Stone Cold, he's against The Rock, and Mankind is his boy. But then they pull this swerve at the very end, which, I mean, like we said on last week's episode, this was probably the most masterful piece of storytelling they ever pulled.
Yeah, absolutely. There was so much going on, like leading up to the Survivor Series and then throughout the Survivor Series. There was just layers upon layers and webs of storyline.
Mm-hmm.
That all then ended up unfolding and leaving everyone speechless.
Yeah, I mean, the only other moment that might come close, in my opinion, is the two Hebners.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when they did that on the main event back in '88, that was a moment. But this whole thing that they did with The Rock I mean, as we're going to talk about when we get to this episode, it was like they kind of built it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so it's announced the next night on Monday Night Raw that the next pay-per-view is named after the new corporate champion, and it's entitled Rock Bottom. So also on this next night on Raw is when we really start to truly see the start of the corporation forming.
Mm-hmm.
So we have Vince McMahon, Shane McMahon together. You have Briscoe and Patterson, Commissioner Slaughter, the Big Boss Man. Now you have the corporate champion, The Rock, in there. And they also bring in Ken Shamrock.
Right. And it's like, I forget how, I mean, we'll get to Shamrock in a minute, but you look at this picture, and at this point, he's the youngest champion ever. I think Vince had a hard time getting the belt around him. But I just think about The Rock's promo that night in Kentucky. I mean, it's like he took it back to 97, 96 when he came in 97 when he started getting the Rocky Sucks chants, and he used all of that. I mean, he made sure that the fans would never ever forget it either.
And so with the corporation, it was strong, definitely a strong group they had going on at the time that McMahon was building, and it was building up a complete opposition to Stone Cold. And they even started to try to woo the New Age Outlaws at this point.
Yeah, which kind of made sense because at this point Triple H had been out with the injury, and X-Pac wasn't out, but I mean, so DX was kind of like a ship without a captain because Shawn wasn't around just yet. But Triple H is gone, China is going on dates with Mark Henry, and the Outlaws seemed like they would be fair game.
And the Outlaws were, like we talked about on the Survivor Series episode, how over they were.
Yeah.
They were arguably the most popular tag team in the world at this time. And that's a lot to say when, in ECW at this time you have the Dudley Boys, and in WCW you have the Outsiders.
Right. Now, at this point in 98, I take that back. The Hall and Nash, this was during the Wolfpack era. So Hall was at Black and White, and Nash was running the Wolfpack. So they had broken up the Outsiders. So I don't know who the most popular tag team in WCW would have been.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody knew what was really, WCW didn't really know what they were doing at that point anyway, but that's another show.
And so, on this Raw, right after Survivor Series, Austin, when he was rehired by Shane, was told that he would get a shot at the title the night after Survivor Series. He comes out looking for that title shot. They're telling him he's not going to get it. He brings out Judge Mills Lane, who was a famous boxing referee, true judge in the state of Nevada, and Mills Lane, who had disqualified Mike Tyson for biting Evander Holyfield deer, also had a TV show at the time, the Judge Mills Lane TV show, comes on the screen and says that the contract Austin has is legally binding, and we actually get to see Austin versus The Rock the night after Survivor Series.
And for a long time, I'd forgotten this match had taken place, and when you think about Rupp Arena and how historic that arena is, I mean, just with Kentucky basketball being the program that it is, that crowd was just phenomenal. That crowd was just so jacked, really all night, but in particular for that match. And I don't know if you have it in there, but I just think about how they showed remember how they showed the whole outline, the whole story arc of them pulling the fans in?
Yeah, absolutely. So they sat in the ring and they showed how it was purposely and everything was done with a purpose to guide you along and not see the twist coming, that the corporation set it up the entire time to make sure the belt went around The Rock's waist.
And to me, again, I think I've said this before, that's what true storytelling does. It doesn't just give you everything right up front. It makes you think back to, oh, I didn't see that. I didn't see that either. It's like, and then you're like, oh, wow, they really got us.
Yeah, I heard Vince Russo made the comparison that he said when him and Ed Ferrara sat down to craft the storyline for Survivor Series 98, they had thought of the movie The Usual Suspects.
Mm-hmm.
To where at the end of the movie, all of a sudden you think back on all the little things that happened, and like, oh, it was so obvious. And he's like, that's what they were doing. They just layered in little pieces. They left little crumbs along the way, and then boom, the big reveal.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, being straight up, like watching that the way that story got told, it's really kind of influenced the way I've been watching movies lately. Like, I saw the movie Widows, and it's got a very interesting storyline that you really have to pay. It's one of those stories you really have to pay attention to all the way, because there might be little snippets that you miss that have a huge part in the story. So I think that what they did here, I mean, they told a story that made you, it was mental. It wasn't all just about somebody getting their ass kicked or something like that. They mess with your head.
Yeah, so this night after everything's unfolded, people are looking to see. The Rock now went from the hottest babyface to the #1 heel.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going against the guy who's been the top guy in the WWE the past year, Stone Cold Steve Austin, on Raw, going at it. And they did a great job, because we're knowing this is going to be WrestleMania. Knowing that's what they're going to try to get to. They were able to, instead of just teasing it and not giving the match, we actually got the match.
Mm-hmm.
But they did it in a way where they were able to give us the match without giving us an outcome, and push us into two different storylines to continue to build by having The Undertaker hit the ring.
Yeah.
And blast Austin with the shovel.
Yeah, and the finish of that was, I mean, like you said, it sent you in two different directions, because they showed you Austin Rock, and I think they kind of did it as a test, because maybe they weren't sure just yet about what they had with The Rock. I mean, this is his first run as champ. Maybe they wanted to see what they had, so they saw how the crowd reacts. It's like, okay, we're good. So now we can send them in another direction, put Austin with Taker, and then put Rock against Mankind. I mean, so.
And the seeds of the Rock Mankind rivalry had already started at Survivor Series.
Yep.
And so it was like, yeah, you had, again, more layered stories going forward.
Yeah.
And on other Raws, leading up to Rock Bottom, we got to see on November 23rd the return of Shawn Michaels.
Shocking.
So Sergeant Slaughter, who had been the commissioner, steps down.
Mm-hmm.
Vince McMahon brings in a commissioner who he says that he will have no authority over, that this commissioner will not answer to anyone, including himself, and that this commissioner will have say over every WWE superstar with the exception of Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And that is Shawn Michaels. And so Shawn comes in as the new commissioner, and initially looks like he's still aligned with D-Generation X.
Mm-hmm.
He says he's going to book his first match. He books X-Pac against the champion, The Rock, and starts doing some DX style motions towards Vince and Shane.
Right.
But then in the main event of that show, when we see X-Pac against The Rock grabs a chair, Commissioner Michaels jumps in the ring, takes a chair for The Rock, but he hits X-Pac with it, jumps out of the ring, The Rock's the champion still, and Shawn Michaels is revealed as part of the corporation.
And this was cool, because this was one of the few times that you had The Rock, an actual Rock character, doing anything with Shawn Michaels, which is a match that I wish would have happened.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, Shawn Michaels in his full HBK mode against The Rock, in 98. That's one of those dream matches that I might have to do on WWE 2K19. And I got to give props to X-Pac. That was, dude could go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, And what I thought was really cool about bringing Shawn Michaels in as the commissioner and turning him heel, putting him as part of the corporation, not only did it continue to strengthen the corporation, but it set up more rivalries for the corporation.
Exactly.
Like, he was the leader of D-Generation X. He was the founder of D-Generation X. Now he's been on the outside. And yet he continues to tell the crowd, that he was DX before DX was cool.
Facts.
And anytime he goes to leave the ring, he'll come out to the Sexy Boy song, but when he's going to leave the ring, he'll hit him with, "Now hit my music," and walks out to the DX thing.
Which, even though he couldn't wrestle during this time and he was going through God knows what, he was still so entertaining. When he was on screen, you wanted to see what he was going to do. When he did commentary at ringside for a few things, you just wanted to hear what kind of craziness he was going to utter.
Yeah, and he was such a bigger superstar. Slaughter was a big star, but Shawn Michaels was a bigger star, and he was more charismatic, and you were able to do more with him. Just that dynamics his character brought, you were able to do so much more with him.
And it's good that they brought him back to do something, because you don't just throw a guy like Shawn Michaels away. Even though he couldn't wrestle, he was one of the best on the mic. He can get heat. He can get a babyface pop. He can do whatever he can be a babyface and a heel in the same promo if he wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the way they portrayed his character as the commissioner, to me, was one of the best commissioners ever on camera.
I agree.
And I love how, we've heard Vince Russo say it multiple times that, he was about sticking true to your character, and you would see that as the evolution of the commissioner character went on for him, it stuck true to the roots of the Shawn Michaels character.
It did. He didn't change. Again, stories, he used to talk to himself about some of the stuff he was going through at that time, but at this point, I couldn't tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we continue to see just the strength of the nation or the corporation building leading up towards rock bottom.
Right. Go ahead.
What was your thoughts on the corporation at this time as a fan?
My thoughts on the corporation it was just like you've got the corporate machine against the working class hero. Look at this. You got Ken Shamrock, IC champion. Badass, legit badass. Shane. We know what he was going to end up doing. We got The Rock, one of the greats of all time. You got Vince. Possibly the number. Maybe one A for number one heel in the business. And you got the Big Boss Man. People forget Big Boss Man was one of the best big men ever in the business, and he had reinvented his character from the cartoonish guy to being a SWAT character, which he evolved with the times.
Yep, and they end up adding in Test.
Yeah.
They have the Briscoe and Patterson, which was your comic relief.
Right.
So, and to help play up that role of the support for Mr. McMahon's character. So, yeah, I thought the same. I thought the corporation was one of the best factions and one of the best angles that we've seen in the history of wrestling.
Yeah.
And so some other storylines that we had, leading up towards, rock bottom, the Nation of Domination is split up. And so we started to see D'Lo Brown and Mark Henry, tag teaming together. And you mentioned it earlier, so we got to see Mark Henry kind of really take on a different character.
We're seeing the beginning of Sexual Chocolate.
And so he takes on the ladies' man, Sexual Chocolate, and he, has the dates with China, and he also comes into a situation with Terry Runnels and Jacqueline, which they took on kind of a interesting team name of PMS, Pretty Mean Sisters.
Yeah, and you hear everybody say it, Jacqueline was a badass. She could go with the dudes.
And it was interesting at this time to see you take Mark Henry, who, was such a physically large person, and he's incredibly strong, and to turn him into this character that's showing a comedy side.
I mean, I had no idea how that was going to come off because, in the Nation, he was, but at the same time, he starts to develop this thing for China, which, I mean, rest in peace, China would be. She had some work done, but I mean, she also, I don't know if she had the plastic surgery yet, but I mean, she was looking pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. She looked much different than she had a year prior.
She did. I mean, she definitely did. Not just but she did look different, and I think that she was also more comfortable in the company. And I just think that whole date thing. When I was watching the date, I was wondering, was that the Mean Street Posse in there?
Oh no, they kind of resembled him, but no, that was that. But it was interesting also that a year prior to this, she really didn't talk on camera either. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I mean, her character had evolved quite a bit.
Quite a bit, and we're going to talk about it further. But I can't help but think about. I really liked watching D'Lo Brown wrestle.
Yeah, D'Lo was solid. It was also some of the other things that talent going on at that time. Like. We saw the Headbangers, as they continued to try to push the Headbangers forward, they turned heel by turning on the Oddities, and the Oddities were accompanied to the ring with the Insane Clown Posse, who also turned on the Oddities at this time.
Yeah, I mean, I even forgot the ICP had any time in WWF. For some reason, I only had them in WCW, but now that I think about it, they did kind of do a song. I think it was on WWF The Music Volume 3. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, they did the Oddities theme song. They did. They had a song on WCW. I know they had their own wrestling thing for a while, like the Juggalo wrestling thing. I know their fans are extremely loyal, so sorry for not knowing that off the top of my head. But I'm trying to think, didn't they do something with ECW at one point also?
They may have.
Like, are they the only group that's actually worked with all three of the major companies?
They may have, because, I mean, ECW seems kind of right up their alley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of my friends that I watched Raw with back during this time was a huge ICP fan. He had the clown logos they would use on their different albums, like, tattooed across his back.
Oh, wow.
And so, I remember he was really into this time of them being involved. So, and then we also saw, interesting was, we knew in the summer of '97, Owen Hart nearly ends Austin's career with the Pile Driver. Mm-hmm. And so now it's kind of using it in a storyline leading up to Rock Bottom as actually starting prior to that, starting in September that year. Owen Hart does a pile driver on Dan Severn, and they play like it breaks Dan Severn's neck. Mm-hmm. And then this leads to Owen wanting to step away, kind of wanting to retire for a while, but bringing back the Blue Blazer character.
Right, and for those who don't know, you have to go back to like late '88 and into '89 to see the Blue Blazer, because he was on. I think the first time I saw him was on Survivor Series '88 on the Ultimate Warriors team, if I'm not mistaken. Then he had a match at WrestleMania 5 against Mr. Perfect, which, if you haven't seen that match, they didn't get long enough to work. That was one of the underrated matches on that card. They just didn't have enough time to do everything.
And so during this time, the Blazer starts interfering in matches. Mm-hmm. And it's to the point where, Steve Blackman's running after him to try to catch him, to rip his mask off, and as he's doing that, Owen Hart actually comes out and attacks Steve Blackman from behind. And so we're seeing kind of go back and forth where, who is the Blue Blazer? We see where the mask comes off at one point and you realize it's Owen, but Jeff Jarrett covers him up.
Right.
There's another point where the mask comes off and you can kind of get a glimpse at it's Jeff Jarrett, but Owen covers him up. And so they continue to go with this until Owen saying he's coming out of retirement to face Steve Blackman at Rock Bottom.
Yep.
And so another match, building up towards Rock Bottom was we're seeing Goldust and another guy we just talked about in the previous angle, Jeff Jarrett, colliding towards a match, and they build up a match for Rock Bottom to where if Goldust wins, Deborah is going to have to strip. And if Deborah wins, then Goldust would have to strip.
I mean, who do you think the fans want to see win? Just think about it.
And so we know Shawn Michaels, Commissioner Michaels, another, as we're continuing to build storylines, we already know, Austin got hit with a shovel. He then goes to get revenge on Taker, hitting Taker with a shovel. We've had Kane involved in this. There was a whole body bag switch where Paul Bearer thought that Kane was in the body bag, but it was actually Undertaker. And so they haul Undertaker off, and Austin and Kane are able to grab Paul Bearer. So we have a lot of stuff going on in that storyline, which is drawing people in. It's a huge storyline, and it's not even the world title storyline.
Right. It's not the world title storyline, and you still got two headliners. You still got two headliners going at it, and you've got some one-upsmanship going, and you've got Austin being in the hospital, and Undertaker's character is evolving into like damn near demonic type stuff. Like he's gonna embalm Austin, and then I believe Kane saves him, and then Austin's gonna like sacrifice, or he's gonna I don't know. He's gonna like do something to Paul Bearer, and I'm like,
because it starts like you mentioned Austin in the hospital, so it's supposed to be from the shovel.
Mm-hmm.
They did a house show after that Raw where they make it Austin passes out at the house show,
mm-hmm.
and they're saying it's concussion symptoms from the shovel, and that's where he's in the hospital when Paul Bearer and Undertaker kidnap him. They take him back to the funeral parlor to embalm him, and Kane saves him. What's interesting to me, looking at that time compared to now, is how much of that storyline and build up to this match happened outside of the ring, and in a lot of cases away from the arena in total.
Yeah, I mean, like Russo had said, it's a proven formula. So much of these development of the stories is taking place in these vignettes outside. I mean, backstage, during promos, or at a cemetery or something like that, at a hospital. I mean, think about when Austin goes to the hospital and attack McMahon. I mean, it's in some ways it seems kind of over the top, but that's what people wanted to see most. That's what people wanted to see. They wanted to see how the story was going to be continued, and it's like they wanted to see the why behind the match, not so much the match.
Yeah, absolutely. And to really add, controversy in this time, the Undertaker symbol.
Yeah.
Which is, if you look at it, it's the crossing of two letters through the T of the Undertaker's name. If you look at that time how they would write out Undertaker, you had the T that would cross down, you had the R that went in front of it, and I believe it was it was the A on the other side that was slashed down, and kind of make an X across the T, which I don't know who designed that symbol, but that cross T shape with the X across it is part of a satanic symbol as well, which you just mentioned the Undertaker really going in that demonic mode, which we know is building towards a ministry of darkness. But then they bring that symbol out, and on the Go Home Raw before Rock Bottom, they tie Austin to it and hang him up in the air. What's interesting is when that happened live on Raw, Undertaker that night actually says, put him on the cross. But every replay after that, including when they showed on Livewire the weekend after it, it was put him on the symbol. It was like they edited it and took the voice out of there.
Yeah, I mean, I can see people getting upset about that. I mean, to me, I'm a believer, and I can tell it wasn't a cross. I mean, but I can see where people would get upset with him going there. But I mean, again, it's a character.
Well, I think at this time also, because a lot of the stuff the Attitude Era was doing was still so unique. No one had seen stuff like this in wrestling. So I think at this time, that's what they were being very careful because they didn't want to go too far with the shock value.
And they went far. That was venturing into that may have been venturing into the land of too far, definitely.
Yeah, they and so like we mentioned, this was, even though this was going to be the main event of the pay-per-view, it wasn't the title match. We had already started building up Mankind and The Rock at Survivor Series, with switching from Mankind being the corporate favorite to The Rock turning heel, and he's truly the corporate champion. Mankind not quitting, and this is actually laying siege for much more to come beyond just this. And Commissioner Michaels, actually awards Mankind his match at Rock Bottom against The Rock. But then they add into the contract that if The Rock is unable to perform for any reason, Mankind wins the title.
Yeah, which is a interesting kind of bit to add to the story, because it gives Mankind an incentive, if you will, to try to make sure The Rock doesn't get there.
Absolutely, and which is kind of interesting not only from that standpoint, but if Shawn Michaels is truly aligned with the corporation, why is he doing stuff that's kind of going against the corporation agenda?
Which I still can't really figure that out. I mean, it's kind of like he's a tweener.
Yeah, so is he truly staying true to the character of Shawn Michaels, the, always rebellious Shawn Michaels, that even though, yeah, he's going to do what's best for him, he's not fully bought in?
I think in my mind, maybe they're holding out hope that maybe his back isn't as bad as he says it is, and maybe, just maybe, they can get something out of Shawn in the ring again at some point. I don't know. I mean, but I think that it's Shawn just giving you just enough to think that, maybe he's going to flip.
Yeah, and I know as a fan myself, and especially a fan of Shawn, who was always my favorite, at this time I didn't know how bad his back was, and I was hoping that every time I would watch something happening, I was thinking, okay, it's only going to be a matter of time until he's back in the ring. They're just using this to position him for a match.
Yeah, because even when they said he would show up, they said he looked great.
Yeah, he did. Like, you go back and you watch these episodes at the time, and you can tell he's built. He's still in physical condition. He may not have been, in the true cardiovascular condition that he was when he was, actually in the ring performing, but physically he looked good still.
Exactly.
And so you hit the nail right on the head of, by setting the stipulation, you are Mankind with the reason to try to keep The Rock from getting there, and staying true to his character. Mankind attacks The Rock on Sunday Night Heat before the pay-per-view.
Yeah, and this is, you got a baby face and Mankind doing some very heel type stuff. This was a time when the lines were just really kind of blurred. But it's logical. It's like, well, if he doesn't show up for the match, I win the title. So why wouldn't I want him to show up for the match? But at the same time, in him entering The Rock, and spoiler alert, he still shows up for the match, it's kind of building it in a little way. It's saying that, okay, it's making the title mean something, because he doesn't just, he clearly doesn't just want to give it up, and he doesn't want to, and the commissioner has said if you don't show up, you're gonna forfeit the title. It's like, okay, so maybe the commissioner isn't really in her pocket as much, so I've got to show up.
And so, you kind of brought up an interesting point there of really making the title feel meaningful. How great of a job do you think they did during this time by not having who had been your number one guy, Austin? The title's no longer on him.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to take The Rock, build him up, and bring him in as the new champion,
mm-hmm.
but yet also make a rivalry for that title without Austin involved and be hot with it.
It's brilliant. And if you think about going back to Austin, who did they use? Like, remember who did Austin's his first pay-per-view title defense was against Dude Love.
Mm-hmm.
It always seemed like they went to Mick Foley to kind of get people ready, or to like help build people up. I mean, you think about Mind Games with Shawn.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he helped out. I mean, Foley helped kind of show another side of him. Triple H, Foley. I mean, in '97, the matches that they had. I mean, Mick Foley seemed to be a guy that they used to kind of show a toughness in these characters.
See, that's what I had always thought. I was always under the opinion that Mankind was used against The Rock to really show the toughness of The Rock, mm-hmm. knowing that Austin on the other side, was supposed to be the world's toughest son of a bitch. You have to have that heel champion
mm-hmm.
to show a tough angle as well to make that believable rivalry between the two of them. And Mankind's the type of guy that The Rock can really, do some damage to
mm-hmm.
to get that over and do it without the corporation having to be involved.
Right, and it's showing a completely different side. It's flipping the entire concept, I believe Foley said this, of the traditional babyface heel on its head, because, The Rock is the good-looking guy with the Versace shirts and, the shades and all that, the catchphrases, so he's going to be the good guy, and Mankind is kind of, typically the bad guy, because he pulls his own hair out and all that stuff, so he's crazy, basically. But not in this situation, and it forces the quote-unquote pretty champion Rock to elevate his level of violence.
And knowing that we're essentially starting to lead towards WrestleMania,
mm-hmm.
we're building towards the road to WrestleMania already. How great of a job are they doing of truly establishing two giant superstars as Austin and The Rock?
It's brilliant because you have their paths crossing just enough to where it's like you wanted to see them ultimately clash, but in order for them to ultimately clash, you had to have Austin kind of go through. You got to deal with Undertaker, but you got The Rock. He's got to deal with this whole Mankind situation. It's like Mankind isn't going to go away because he's feeling like he got screwed by Vince, and really, in actuality, Vince McMahon is kind of at the center of both of the feuds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, Austin has to go through The Undertaker because it's set up to where Austin had a shot at Survivor Series. He got a shot the night after Raw.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only way for Austin to get another shot at the title is he has to win the Royal Rumble. But to get into the Royal Rumble, he has to win this match.
Yep.
And so, can you think back as a fan, how were you feeling leading into the Rock Bottom pay-per-view?
How was I feeling leading against the Rock Bottom pay-per-view? I was pretty excited. I knew The Rock was going to ultimately leave with the title. I didn't think Mankind was going to win, but I was really kind of curious about how this whole Buried Alive thing was going to turn out.
Yeah, and for me, Survivor Series 1998, up until WrestleMania 15 is one of my favorite periods ever.
Yeah.
And leading into this, I remember just being super excited for this pay-per-view, really looking forward to it. I remember getting over to, we were watching at my cousin's house, and I remember getting over to my cousin's house probably 3 hours before he'd even hit the air. Because it was like already with snacks lined up ready to go, and just to like start talking about what could possibly happen on the show.
Yeah, because, I mean, not everybody had internet at this point.
Right.
And so you couldn't read spoilers and stuff like that. So part of the excitement was just trying to figure out what was going to happen.
Yeah, so it's not like now where the internet's in the palm of everyone's hands.
Right.
You know, at this time, yeah, the internet existed, but it may be like if we were, you know, sitting around like 6 of us, maybe one person had access to the internet. So
depending on if they had an AOL CD.
right. So let's get to the actual pay-per-view. So the show kicks off, a tag team match. D'Lo Brown and Mark Henry, with Jacqueline and Terry Reynolds accompanying them, takes on the Godfather and Val Venus.
And the hoes.
Yep, exactly.
But that's what they were called. We're not degrading them. That's what their characters were.
So you actually have 3 of the former members of the Nation of Domination all in this one match.
And people kind of forget the Nation. Don't sleep on the Nation of Domination. I mean, you think about the people who come through there. I mean, you've got Farouk, Hall of Famer. You got, Farouk's a Hall of Famer. You got the Godfather / Papa Shango, Hall of Famer. Mark Henry, Hall of Famer. The Rock, going to be a Hall of Famer. I mean, D'Lo Brown wasn't a slouch. Owen Hart was a former Nation of Domination member. Should be a Hall of Famer, but we know, you know.
Yeah, so yeah, the Nation was strong, and you're starting to see the guys that come out of the Nation continue to do big things as well, continue to be important parts of the Attitude Era. And in this match, we see D'Lo and Mark Henry actually defeat the Godfather and Val Venus.
Yeah, and I still think about, I mean, when you think about some of the best frog splashes in the business, D'Lo Brown's gets underrated a lot. He had one of the best frog splashes that you'll see in wrestling.
And Val Venus at this time, you know, it's knowing, you know, he really didn't end up doing as much as he potentially could have in the business. But at this time, when you go back and watch the stuff, Val was solid on the mic, he was solid in the ring, and he was involved in a lot during the Attitude Era.
He really was. I mean, I remember the Ryan Shamrock thing, was it the choppy your pee-pee thing and all of that stuff. And when he would say, "Hello, ladies," I mean, the crowd popped. So, I mean,
yeah, it would flash the women in the crowd, and yeah, they would go crazy when he would make that statement.
Yeah, I mean, at one point, I mean, they had, I don't know if it was, I think it might have been after this, they had him do something with Jenna Jameson. I mean,
yeah, she was involved in his entrance video also, wasn't she?
I think they did use that footage. Don't act like y'all don't know who Jenna Jameson is.
So, the next match also is a tag team match. The Headbangers defeat the Oddities.
Yeah, this was one of those, I mean, the best thing about the Headbangers was probably their music.
Yeah, these are both tag teams, or teams at the time, you know, because Oddities were definitely more than just the 2 guys. This particular match was just Golga and Kurgan. They were 2 groups that were utilized quite a bit during the Attitude Era, but in the long run, they really didn't age well.
Yeah, this was kind of, I mean, at this point, the Oddities, at first, for a while they had Sable with them, and that kind of faded out. At this point, I think they had Luna with them, and I think that kind of faded out. So it was just kind of like, for lack of a better word, this match was kind of filler.
Yeah, definitely agreed. And so we move into the next match. Steve Blackman defeats Owen Hart by count.
Yeah, and Owen, of course, being from Canada, got a major pop. And I believe we even got a nugget chant if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he just kind of walked out of the ring, and I actually forgot how jacked up, like how cut Steve Blackman was.
Yeah, I noticed that too when I was like watching back. I remembered Blackman was physically fit. I knew the martial arts background. But yeah, when I went back and was watching those old episodes and looking at him, it's like, yeah, he was jacked.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my cousin, who I just mentioned, we were watching this at his house. I remember his sister really, like, that's when she got hooked in wrestling, watching us with us, because she saw Steve Blackman. So she wanted to keep watching from that
Of
point.
all the people to pull her in is Steve Blackman. I guess they had something for everybody.
Yeah. Well, and his other sister, he had two sisters. So one got hooked to Steve Blackman. The other one was the combination of Shawn Michaels and The Rock. So we then move into another tag match, but this time a 6-man tag match. And listen to the guys in this match. The Brood, so Christian Edge and Gangrel, taking on the Job Squad. Al Snow, Bob Holly, and Scorpio.
You know, as I was watching the Raws leading up to this, this actually happened in Baltimore. Al Snow versus The Rock. And I remember this match because, for two reasons, they had members of the Baltimore Ravens at ringside, including Ray Lewis, who was The Rock's teammate at Miami. And The Rock is getting ready to do the people's elbow, but he decides to not do the people's elbow to Al Snow. He gives the people's elbow to Head. And I forgot all about that, but that was just so entertaining. It's like, you're giving the people's elbow to Head. I wonder if The Rock remembers that. But back to the 6-man, who would have thought that of the 6 people in this match, who would you have had as the Hall of Famer?
You know, at that point, I definitely wouldn't have thought Edge at that point. You know, I never really could get into the Brood.
Me either.
They weren't interesting to me. I mean, I didn't dig the vampire thing or the bloodbaths. But, you know, looking back at it now, knowing how big Edge became, knowing how good Christian was.
Right.
And then, you know, really, you know, Al Snow was very underrated. Scorpio also underrated.
Right.
Very strong performer. And, you know, I mean, so kind of looking at the talent in this match was like, man, these guys all went on to do bigger things.
Yeah, they really did. And this was one of Christian's first, if not his first, pay-per-view appearance. I was listening to the Christian episode on Something to Wrestle, and they were just talking about how intertwined he and Edge were. And at one point in the match, Edge kind of does a leap off of Christian. Kind of reminded me of Poetry in Motion, but he jumps off of him over the top rope and out to the outside of the ring. And I forgot all about that, and I was like, oh, there might be something there.
Yeah, and I haven't listened to that episode yet of Something to Wrestle, so that'd be interesting to listen to. It's just, it was just something to me, the Brood's look and everything, I just couldn't get into it. But, you know, you go back and you start looking at some of the stuff that Edge did later in his career and really see how great he was.
Yeah, and I think at this point, they were trying to figure out just who Edge actually was going to be and how to best use them. And at this point, I guess they thought that having them be with Gangrel would be better for them because they weren't necessarily ready to be by themselves yet. But at least they knew they had something.
Yeah, and Gangrel definitely was an interesting look. I mean, to really have the fangs, to have your teeth sharpened with the fangs, and to my understanding, they actually practiced that lifestyle. He practiced that lifestyle at the time. And so, yeah, I mean, I could see where, when you look at him, it's like, okay, here's a guy who has the look, we can do something with this character, and then they just kind of tie Edge and Christian into him.
Right.
But yeah, so the Brood actually wins this match, and then we move on to one of the matches we talked about the build-up for. We have Goldust against Jeff Jarrett. There's interference in the match where Deborah gets involved. Goldust gets hit with the guitar. Jeff Jarrett, actually gets the win initially, as we're seeing, but Shawn Michaels comes out. Commissioner Michaels comes out, tells Double J, great job. Why don't you go in the back, have yourself a cold one. Stops Deborah, and even though he's the heel commissioner, and Jeff Jarrett and Deborah are the heels, he sides with the babyface here, staying true to the Heartbreak Kid character though, and tells her he's looking through the rulebook and bringing in a foreign object such as a guitar results in a disqualification. Tells her to stop her grinning and drop her linen.
And I mean, Deborah. I mean, her and Jeff had been together in WCW. She had been aligned with them. Now she comes into WWF during a time when the women were basically showing it all, and she starts stripping, and Shawn puts some money between her. He happens to go in his wallet to a stripper stash and pulls out a little, puts it in between, and she's about to pull off the top, and then the Blue Blazer shows up.
Yep, yeah, Blue Blazer and Jeff Jarrett make it back down to ringside to save Deborah. At this point, would you have predicted that Deborah's going to be the one to go over Sable in upcoming months?
I wouldn't have predicted it, but they were pretty neck and neck because they both had that similar package, if you will, and on any given day, I mean, you couldn't go. I don't think you could go wrong with either one, but I think they wanted to push Sable more because she was a homegrown product.
Yeah, and I think at this time I definitely wouldn't have thought of, which of course, now we know that there was some issues going on with Sable and her contract.
Right.
And that's why, Deborah was moved up. But yeah, at this point I definitely wouldn't have thought anyone was going to be able to take that top spot from Deborah. From Sable.
No, but Deborah had, if she had started out if she hadn't had the WCW history, she may have had a little bit more of a chance, I think.
Yeah. And so after this, we move into the World Tag Team title match. The New Age Outlaws defeat the Corporation, Ken Shamrock and the Big Boss Man, who was a corporate and company to the ring by Commissioner Michaels.
Yeah, and I mean, Commissioner Michaels can't be happy about this because, I mean, they hit this in this match. He's clearly Team Corporate, and I believe before this they went to a Quetaway with Doc Hendricks, aka Michael P.S. Hayes, with Triple H in China, and it just kind of cracked me up that they felt that they had to put phone number not in the service or something over the WWF hotline.
Yeah.
Like, if somebody actually tried to call that,
I wonder what number. If someone actually has registered those numbers now, maybe they legally have to do it.
maybe they do, or maybe they just think somebody's actually that stupid.
Well, they do have to tell people coffee's hot now. So
This is true.
But, so Shawn Michaels does try to interfere in this match, continuing his rivalry with DX and helping bring that Corporation DX rivalry in here. But he tries to interfere, but Billy Gunn's able to reverse it and get the pin, and the Outlaws retain the tag titles.
Which is good because, again, you're giving some more heat to the corporation because DX is over right now too, and you're giving The Rock another person to continue a rivalry with, because he and Triple H throughout 1998 had a tremendous rivalry, and by putting a potential Triple H Rock match together during this time, you're also elevating Triple H.
Yeah, and similar to what WCW had been able to do with the NWO in the 2 years up to this point, it was basically if you were in a rivalry with the NWO, or if they did that NWO logo on you, you were important.
Mm-hmm.
And in this situation, the corporation, Mr. McMahon was such a big character, such a big heel, that it made the corporation bigger. You add, the elements in there like The Rock and stuff like that, continue to make it bigger, that every match now, so you take the Outlaws, which you take the New Age Outlaws versus Shamrock and Boss Man, doesn't really sound that exciting, even though the Outlaws are over. But then you add that element of the corporation behind Shamrock and Boss Man, and now you have another major storyline going on.
Right, because you don't know. The odds are kind of stacked against them, because the corporation at any point could decide that, okay, we're going to screw the Outlaws. You screw the Outlaws, you get more heat on the corporation, the Outlaws win, the Outlaws triumph, the fans are happy. Either way, you win, because if the corporation gets more heat, that's ultimately good for the overall storyline.
Yeah, and so then we move into the two big elements that are being built right now, starting with the championship match, The Rock versus Mankind. And so the match is delayed initially when Mankind tries to have Vince McMahon and The Rock admit that he didn't submit at Survivor Series. And so when they refuse to, Mankind rips up his contract and starts attacking The Rock. And so from here, they go, they continue to fight in the ring, and McMahon's trying to get the referee to disqualify Mankind.
Yeah, this match, I enjoy it because of the fact that, Mankind is, he's basically whooping The Rock's ass, for lack of a better word, and the referee will not disqualify Mankind because we wanted to see a winner, and I'm glad they didn't disqualify him, because again, you're forcing The Rock to elevate his level because of the fact that Mankind is one of the most, this is the dude that got thrown off Hell in a Cell earlier this year.
Right, and so he starts off really showing everyone that The Rock can take a beating by Mankind starting off on the offense, and then with Vince McMahon kind of distracting everyone, The Rock's able to start kind of mounting a comeback, and he's able to show that he's able to physically, deliver a beating, like we talked about earlier, like show a different side of his character, show that toughness, which we really hadn't got to see since the ladder match against Triple H.
Right.
And so, now we're kind of getting to see that more on the main stage. And, like Mankind goes up to the top rope, Shane kind of jumps in and grabs his leg to distract him, The Rock's able to throw him off onto the mats on the floor.
How many times does Holy take that ball?
Yeah, and so, Mankind takes a DDT off a chair. Definitely the match continues to get brutal. Vince McMahon's trying to call for the bell to get it to ring. So it's like all these different elements of Vince McMahon trying to save the title and continuing to show that desperation of keep the title on The Rock and away from everyone else.
Right. Make keeping the title important.
Yep, exactly. And so Mankind ends up winning the match by referee stoppage.
Right. And however, being corporate, finding a loophole, Vince Vince McMahon concedes that Mankind won the match, but he says that the title can only change hands by pinfall or submission, and since The Rock didn't submit, The Rock is still the champion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Mankind pulled out Mr. Sacco, does a mandible claw, referee stops the match, and McMahon says, wait, but he didn't submit.
Mm-hmm.
Which now, we're once again tying back into the Survivor Series 98 storyline of where Mankind talks about he didn't submit. And so we're already laying definitely the foundation for the next matchup between the two of them.
Wow, I can't wait till we do that one, because that one, I think this is where really, like, my admiration for The Rock and his character, it just starts to just build week after week after week. It became to the point where I would just want to record his promos.
Yeah, and The Rock definitely starts to take off on his own. He starts to, like a rocket, just shooting through the air, becoming one of the biggest stars ever. And this is just continued such a well thought out story of they continue to play off this submission, that, submission without saying I quit, because we know they're building to the I quit match.
Yeah, and the I quit match is, when you think about that, you think that's more geared towards Mick Foley, because, I mean, barbed wire matches, death matches. I mean, I think I have a death match DVD of Mick Foley at home somewhere. I mean, you think that's going to be more geared towards him. You don't think about The Rock being able to do something like that, because he's 26 years old at this point. He hasn't done anything like that. So again, you're making The Rock, you're building The Rock, you're helping him get to that level where at WrestleMania it's going to be a clash of the Titans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so after this match, Mankind responds by attacking Vince McMahon, using Mr. Sacco and the mandible claw on him, doing the same thing to Shane McMahon, and then attacking Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe. But then Ken Shamrock and the Big Boss Man hit the ring to make the save.
Yeah, I mean, again, well thought out story, gives you enough, but you still want more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely sets it up where you feel like you got your money's worth on the pay-per-view, but you got to know what happens the next night on Raw.
Yep.
So then we move into our main event, the next match, which is the Buried Alive match, the final match of the show, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Undertaker.
Which, when you think of a Buried Alive match, you think, who is that geared towards?
Yeah.
Obviously The Undertaker, but this is a continuation. I mean, these two had headlined SummerSlam together.
Mm-hmm.
They had a match in '97 on pay-per-view also, but Austin's the biggest star in wrestling at the time. Undertaker is Undertaker, enough said. And just the way they built towards this match, this whole storyline, I mean, it made you understand why they're going at it with each other.
Yeah, they definitely, like you mentioned, their rivalry started in the summer, started in June. They had the big SummerSlam 98 match. And so this was the blow-off match. This was to end it. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of get that finale-type gimmick to the match of the Buried Alive. The
right.
Of actually having the grave dug outside the ring. You're going to have to drop the opponent in. You're going to have to fill it up. They built that up all by showing, they were trying to bury Austin, trying to bomb him at one point. And it all started, hitting him with a shovel. So it was like definitely all the little pieces laid over and over to set up this gimmick style match.
Yeah. Was this the first Buried Alive match?
I believe it was. I don't think there was another one before this.
Yeah, this was...
Or no, wasn't there Mankind and Taker in 96?
Yeah, you're right, there was.
So this was the second Buried Alive match.
Okay. But yeah, this this was just the classic blow-off match. You got two of the greatest of all time going at it. I mean, the title is still involved, even though it's not on the line in this match. But you got Austin, who has to win this match in order to get into the Royal Rumble, and you managed to get the Big Red Machine involved, the Undertaker's brother. So just think about all the star power in these last two matches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kane's involvement in the stories leading up to this gets him involved in this match, driving a tombstone onto the Undertaker, and then Austin able to bring in a backhoe loader to scoop the dirt and have the dirt drop onto the Undertaker.
So Austin in this year has driven, let's see, cement truck, monster truck, maybe it was monster truck
99,
yeah. Zamboni,
a
hearse, backhoe loader. What else had he driven this year? And it's like he would learn how to drive this stuff like maybe a few minutes or a few hours before the show. I just think about, I almost forgot about this in the history of things that Stone Cold has driven at WWF events.
Yeah, so we know the way this pay-per-view is ending. The Rock, even though he loses, he's still the WWF at the time champion. He's the WWE champion. Austin's beat The Undertaker. He's earned his right to be in the Royal Rumble. And so we're heading towards a Royal Rumble with two huge superstars.
Yep.
Going towards, the biggest title. Austin wanting to get it back. The Rock wanting to keep it. McMahon being his rivalry with Austin that's been carrying this whole year and wanting to protect his corporate champion. So this story is continuing to stay hot.
Yeah, and it took him into 1999, which 1999 was a year. It was really, if you think about it, the beginning of like the demise of the Monday Night Wars.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're kind of seeing 1999 is the start of it was a great year for WWE, and it's going to also be a changing of the Attitude Era. Because we know, Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara is going to leave in 1999, but that's in October. But that first half of '99 is so exciting.
Yeah, that was. Just the build to WrestleMania alone was one of my favorite. That 3-month stretch. I put that against any 3-month stretch in the history of wrestling.
Yep. Yeah, we're gonna bring definitely all three of those shows in the upcoming months. So in January we will definitely cover Royal Rumble '99 to continue on to this. So if you haven't already, you can pick up WWE Network, start with Survivor Series '98. Watch up until the Royal Rumble, and then you're able to catch our Survivor Series '98 episode, this episode, and be ready for our Royal Rumble '99 episode.
Yeah, I can't wait to rewatch that one because The Rock really started to take his promos to the next level, and the comedy. Enough said.
Yeah, and at this point, like we've mentioned, since Survivor Series '98, so many storylines, so many guys involved in so many different angles. Everybody was involved in the story. So Royal Rumble '99 was extremely exciting from a fan standpoint.
Yeah, and you continue to see people you continue to see characters elevate. You continue to see new characters elevate and become fan favorites. So you continue to see characters evolve. So it's an exciting time, and it's a time that, I think we probably said this before, it's still felt. The ripple effects are still felt even today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we will pick up with the Raw right after Rock Bottom '98 and lead up to that Royal Rumble in that episode. But our next episode, we're going to step away from the WWE for a moment. We've been really focused lately on the WWE and the Attitude Era, but we're going to step away from that for a moment, and we're going to go to what was going on the other side, the WCW side, and actually focus on what is arguably responsible for the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
The thing that truly ignited the Monday Night Wars, which caused the WWE to have to go to the Attitude Era, and that's we're going to focus on possibly, arguably still the biggest group in the history of wrestling. You still see t-shirts everywhere. We know they recently did a reunion that brought a lot of attention to it just for a Q&A, and you can't really talk about wrestling in the 90s without talking about this group.
Yeah, I mean, the NWO is what pulled me all the way back in with the leg drop hurt around the world.
Yeah, and we've heard that so many times, like I mentioned in our Tyson episode, like Tyson pulled me in, which I hadn't watched in a long time, but we've heard it, multiple times, and I remember people that I knew at that time when I still hadn't turned on wrestling because, Tyson hadn't got involved yet, but, I knew guys that were older than me that hadn't watched since really the Hogan era ended in the late 80s, maybe early 90s they had been watching up to, but now all of a sudden they were watching wrestling again because of the NWO.
Yep.
So that will be our next episode. We will bring you the NWO. We'll talk about the formation of the NWO, similar to as we did with our DX episode, which you can find on our YouTube channel. We're going to talk about the formation of the NWO, and we will have multiple parts of the NWO, similar to how we will with D-Generation X.
Yep, so look forward to us. Give us a like or subscribe. Tell your friends about us. Leave us some comments about what you want to see. Looking forward to talking about the NWO.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So we're on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, and of course our YouTube channel. So we will see you next time.
All right.